Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Rotary Club of Seattle, the fourth oldest and one of the largest Rotary clubs in the world. It's good to see you. I'm glad to see so many smiling faces. If you're visiting today, we have a couple of traditions at the start of our meetings. We have inspiration and we have music. Past President Todd Sommerfeld is leading us in our invocation today. After that, General Jimmy Collins, retired, and Burr Stewart will lead us in song.
Thanks, Mark. Today's program theme is a world without hate. And I have to confess, there are those occasions where I find myself vulnerable to that ugly emotion of hate, when my failure to forgive degrades into a lingering resentment of an event or an individual or some circumstance that, in my impeccable judgment, just isn't fair. Nelson Mandela was a fellow who knew a little something about resentment. When Mandela was released after 27 years of unjust imprisonment, he was asked why he was not resentful. His response? Resentment is like a glass of poison that a man drinks. Then he sits down and waits for his enemy to die. Mandela went on to say, "We must strive to be moved by a generosity of spirit that will enable us to outgrow the hatred and conflicts of the past." With those wise words in mind, I invite you, each in your own way, to pray with me. Great Creator, you made us, each with the capacity to forgive. Help us to find that capacity in our hearts, that we may bless others with our grace and ourselves with your peace. And all God's Rotarians said, Amen.
Our featured speaker today is Rais Bhuiyan, the founder of World Without Hate. In 2001, Rais was working as a convenience store clerk in Dallas when he was shot in the face by Mark Stroman, a white supremacist seeking vengeance for the 9/11 tragedy. Stroman proudly called himself the Arab killer. Before shooting Rais, Stroman murdered two other men he thought were Muslim. Rais responded to the attack by forgiving Stroman and attempting unsuccessfully to prevent his execution in Texas. How does that happen? How is it possible to forgive a person who tried their very best to kill you? This is not just a story of forgiveness, though. This is a testament to the power each of us has to turn hate in another person into love. Please welcome Mr. Rais Bhuiyan.
Imagine it is the middle of the night. A Boeing 747 is flying over the Pacific Ocean towards Los Angeles. A young brown-skinned passenger introduced himself as a military pilot to the flight attendant who served him dinner and asked if he could visit the cockpit. The flight attendant returned after a few minutes, and what happened next, we cannot imagine occurring today. The flight attendant told the young passenger he was invited to the cockpit by the captain. He had a light refreshment, had a wonderful conversation with the captain and co-pilot, got a mini orientation of the 747 cockpit, which he never even imagined. A thrilling beginning for this young man's first journey to the US. I was that young pilot who visited the cockpit on my way to the US to pursue additional higher education, while also hoping to experience the American dream. Within the last 16 years, life in the US and around the world has changed so drastically that when I fly nowadays, I try not to look at the cockpit. I don't say anything in Arabic because this language has become an instant security threat. The other is not the enemy. Hate and ignorance is the enemy, which creates fear, mistrust, and continues to keep us divided. It also pushes us to live in a society where innocent people are paying the price for someone else's crime, too often with their lives, which creates more victim, more division, and solves nothing. I can speak to that from personal experience because I was one of these innocent victims. Shortly after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, a white supremacist in Dallas went on a shooting rampage killing Muslims. I was one of his victims. 10 days after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, I was working at a friend's gas station when a man wearing a bandana, sunglasses, and a baseball cap, holding a sort of double-barrel shotgun burst in. From my previous robbery experience, I offered him money, but instead of taking it, his gaze remained fixed, and he mumbled, "Where are you from?" And before I could say anything more than, "Excuse me," he pulled the trigger from point blank range. As a result of this shooting, I lost vision in one eye. The right side of my face and skull was and remains peppered with more than 3 dozen bullet fragments. I lost my home, my job, my sense of security, and my fiancée, but gained more than $60,000 in medical bill. I reached out to the Red Cross for help, but they informed me I was only qualified for 1 week's worth of groceries. When my father heard what happened to me, he suffered a stroke, but thankfully, he survived. My shooter, Mark Stroman, killed 2 men during his 9/11 retaliation shooting spree, and he claimed he was hunting for Arabs. But not one of his 3 victims was Middle Eastern. After his arrest, he told the news media that he had done what most Americans wanted to do. They just didn't have the guts. He claimed he was the true American, a patriot. He blamed me and my kind for 9/11, and he said, America was no place for Muslims until I started a campaign to try to save his life from Texas death row. Inspired by my faith and upbringing, I was not only able to forgive him, but also formed a coalition of Hindus, Christians, Muslims, Jews, and atheists, tried to save the life of the man who tried to end mine. I went to the European Union Parliament, German Parliament, as well as the headquarters of Lundbeck, the lethal injection manufacturer in Denmark, and convinced its executives to urge the governor of Texas not to use their product to kill a human being. After the visit, Lundbeck also announced that it would stop supplying this drug to the US prisons that carry out execution. Not only that, I also went to the US Supreme Court asking for clemency for my attacker. Mark was stunned when he came to know our efforts to save his life. This was not something he expected from a Muslim. He thanked the entire Muslim community, condemned his own act of violence, and called me brother in a phone conversation. His last words called for an end to hatred, saying, "Hate is going on everywhere. It has to stop. Hate causes a lifetime of pain." He hated me when he didn't know me, but in the end, said he loved me. When you get to know the other, it is hard for you to hate them. As Warren Buffett says, don't just go for safe projects, take on the tough problems. After this incident, I had the easy option to go back to my birth country, but I chose to stay back, knowing that life would be extremely painful with a wounded mind and body and without a loved one in the US. While pursuing my American dreams, I also envisioned for a more compassionate, empathetic, and forgiving world and founded the nonprofit World Without Hate. Unfortunately, I could not save the life of my attacker, Mark Stroman, but perhaps I can help save future Mark Stroman. To the nonprofit World Without Hate, I have dedicated my life to preventing ignorance and violence and eradicating hatred by educating people about the transformational power of mercy and forgiveness, empowering people to take time to connect with others unlike them, and take time to learn from one another instead of stereotypes and labels society has imposed. Together, we must stand up against human suffering, even if we may not like the victims. The challenges, Jews, Muslims, African Americans, Mexicans, women, the LGBTQ community, and all who are suffering right now may not affect your or your loved one's life today, but may indeed tomorrow. It's a tremendous honor for me to share my story with such an incredible group of people. It is amazing to be in such a great city, not only famous for Starbucks, its tech companies, and rain, but also for its stance to the Muslim ban, upholding our true American values and the Constitution. The Pacific Northwest, especially because of your contribution, is a beacon of hope and has the capacity to eradicate hate and violence the way the Rotary has eliminated polio from the world. I welcome your support, advice, and ideas, and I hope we can find ways to work together to make this the world we all deserve, a world without violence, a world without victims, and a world without hate. Thank you so much.
Rais, thank you. Wow. When I first met Rais, it was hard to imagine that he had been shot in the face at point-blank range with a sawed-off shotgun. We have a couple of slides that I'd like to pull up now to show you what Rais looked like after the shooting. Is it coming? Okay. Yeah, we'll pop them up when we have them. Let's begin, though, Rais, with this book, The True American, that came out in 2014, telling your story. I highly recommend it, The True American, Murder and Mercy in Texas. So it takes a look at you and your attacker in tandem. And I guess the largest takeaway of this whole story is that hate is a value that's taught. Tell me how Mark Stroman was taught hate.
Well, until I didn't know Mark Stroman at all before this incident happened. And after this shooting incident, I went through a healing process and took time to learn about the crime, about Mark Stroman, and how he ended up killing human beings and ended up in death row. And it was fascinating to learn about his life and how he grew up. He wrote a long letter to me from the death row, where he talked about his upbringing, his poor upbringing, and he said that his stepfather taught him, in a paragraph he said that his stepfather taught him a lot of negative lessons that he should have never learned. And that's a copy of the letter. And he said, I'm unlearning some of them, and I have unlearned some of them. I don't know who your parents were, but it is obvious that they are wonderful people to lead you to act this way, to hate someone you have every right. And when I get to know more about him from his sister and his kids, especially his sister told me that when he was 16, he asked for his birth certificate to get a driver's license. And he saw a different person's name as on his father's, the person he knew as his father was not the same person on the birth certificate. So he asked his mother, who is this guy? And his mother said, that's your real father. Then who is that? He said, that's your stepfather. And he said, why didn't you tell me all this year that Mr. Baker was not my father? And she said, I didn't want you. If I had $50, I would have aborted you. And you can imagine growing up as an American teen at the age of 16, if your mother says that your life is worth of $50. So that's how he grew up, with lots of negative teachings in a violent environment, and his father always beat him. Anytime he came back from school crying, his father asked him, what did you cry? Somebody made fun of me. Next time, you go and beat them. Whereas in my parents taught me, forgive, give them time. They will come back to you today or tomorrow, and they will ask for mercy and forgiveness.
Mark Stroman had a swastika tattoo on his neck, not knowing that his own grandmother was Jewish, right?
Right. I mean, that was another very shocking thing for him, that he had a swastika tattoo on his neck, but he didn't know that his grandmother was a Jew. After end up in death row, he finally found out that his grandmother was a Jew, and he felt ashamed of the tattoo, and he covered it up with something beautiful image or something.
I want to go back to the early days. Do we have the pictures of Rais's face after the shooting? So take a look on the left there, and I think there's one more picture. So these were shotgun pellets that came from a sawed-off shotgun that was fired literally at point blank. It's amazing. Rais, you said that you had no health insurance afterward, and there's an X-ray there. When you would put your head down on the floor to pray, there was a shotgun pellet in the middle of your forehead that was still there.
Right. I received more than 35 pellets, and when I touch my face, I can feel all up there. And I had one, a big one at the middle of my forehead, and anytime I prayed, it gave me a lot of pain. And since I didn't have any health insurance, I could not remove that. I couldn't go to hospital and remove that. So finally, in 2008, when I got my first IT job, had a good, had a health insurance, even though it was a pre-existing condition, but I was able to take care of that. It came out.
I want to go back to after the shooting. Take us back to that process that led you to decide, I need to forgive this man. When did that start?
Well, it started after this incident happened to me. I went through a healing process where I grew mentally, psychologically, emotionally. And in 2009, I went to Mecca for Muslims' religious pilgrimage, and I stayed there for a month. And it is in Mecca I deeply realized that hate and revenge may bring temporary satisfaction, but never bring peace or solution to any situation. I saw Mark Stroman as a human being like me. Instead of hating him, I started learning more about him, and I saw him as a human being, as a victim as well, and I deeply realized by executing Mark, we would simply lose a human life without dealing with the root cause. And I thought that if I could do something to save his life, and he can contribute to society in a positive way, and inspire people like him on the street not to follow his path. And I knew that time that execution is not the solution. I have to do the best I can to save this man's life so that we can make a change in our society, in our country, and in the world.
So this is Texas, a
Right.
state that is very much in support of the death penalty. What was the reaction when you started fighting for this man's life?
I was blown away when I received tremendous amount of positive support around the world, not just from the US or from Texas. People are signing up online petition from Norway, from Brazil, from India, Bangladesh. I mean, I was shocked in a positive way. And except few nasty emails, I mean, who said, well, your Quran teaches violence, go back and learn your Quran before you try to save this person's life. But it was an opportunity for me to reach out to those people and share the actual teaching of all the religious script, and they never came back with any kind of hate message. I got tremendous amount of support from the local peace activists, human rights activists from Dallas, and also Amnesty International came forward. ACLU, they also came forward. Muslim Legal Fund of America, they came forward, supported my campaign. And another nonprofit from London called Reprieve, actually they are the one helped me to take my campaign to the European Union Parliament, German Parliament, and at the headquarters of Lundbeck in Denmark.
You wanted to visit Mark Stroman in prison. You were never able to. If you could tell the backstory to that, there was a lot of resistance from the court system to even allow you access to him.
Right, I didn't know that as a victim, it was my right to ask for a mediation dialogue to meet my offender face to face. So when I came to know about this right, I requested the Department of Criminal Justice and the prison system. But they told me, if we let you meet him, you will be re-victimized. I said, I'm the one coming forward asking for this, and you are telling me that I will be re-victimized. I'll come with a psychiatrist who will make sure that I will not be re-victimized. But they kept telling me that, no, we cannot let you do that because we care about you. We don't care about him. And finally, one day, one of the officers from the prison system told me that if we let you meet him, are you going to say that you won this fight and we lost? I said, I'm talking about very serious business here, saving a person's life. I'm talking about, not a win or loss in this case. How could you think about who's going to lose, who's going to win? And he said, I'm just making sure that, are you going to say something in your website that we lost? I said, sorry, you are way far where I'm coming from. You're getting my point. So ultimately, long story short, they did not allow me to meet my attacker. Even though I had the right as a victim under Texas law, they did not, but I did not stop there. I took them to the court. I filed a lawsuit against the governor of Texas, against the attorney general, the prison system, and also the TDCJ. I took them to court to uphold my victim's right.
So you never got to see Mark Stroman face to face?
I was not allowed to see him face to face.
When did Mark Stroman learn that you were fighting for his life?
His lawyer told him that, do you know that one of your victims is running a campaign outside to try to save your life? And he was stunned. And the lawyer told me that a 42-year-old grown-up man just burst into tears in front of me. You cannot believe that. And then he said, it's unbelievable that I never even said sorry to him or the other victims. How come they are running a campaign to save my life? He couldn't believe that, and he was pretty much shocked. And it actually struck him very positive way.
So when did you receive the letter? We had a picture of the letter up there. When did you receive the letter? And dive deeper into exactly what Mark said in that letter.
I received that letter June 14th, 2011, a month before he was executed. And in that letter, he said again and again that, Rais, I wanted to write this letter again and again, many times. But I could not think through it, that what should I write? Because I caused so much pain and suffering in your life. And what is there to comfort you? What can I say? But once you reached out to me, it gave me the courage. It gave me the opportunity to come forward and express my feeling and ask for mercy and forgiveness. And in one statement, he said that in a free world, I was free, but I was locked up in a prison inside myself because of the hate I carry in my heart. It is due to your message, I'm more content now than ever before. And in another paragraph, he said, he thanked my parents. He said, I don't know who your parents were, but it is obvious they're wonderful people to lead you to act this way to someone you have every right to hate. And it's very fascinating the way he developed his writing skill, very articulate, very polished, no grammatical mistake. And at the end of the letter, he said that hope was always a drop of rain to me, which I never had. But in the course of time, you gave me so much hope that I have ever possessed in my entire life. And I couldn't hold my tears. I read that letter 1 a.m. in the morning because I wanted to pay utmost attention to that letter and read every single word very carefully. And when I was reading, I could not believe this is the same human being who shot me in the face 10 years back and killed 2 human beings, and now he's going to be executed. I could not believe that.
There was also a videotape that was made. Tell me when, we're going to take a look at it in just a second, but when was this video made and what led up to him being able to make this video that you ended up seeing?
At the height of this campaign, we got tremendous amount of support from all over the world, starting from New Zealand, Australia, Norway, France, Germany, even South Asia. And all the victims came forward. The other 2 widows, they also came forward and they said, we forgave Mark Stroman. Go for it. So we were very hopeful that since all the victims forgave, why the state of Texas would go ahead and kill him. And we had a very good lawyers, 2 lawyers, a big team from London, from Dallas, from Austin. We're working very closely to win this case. But at the same time, I thought, in case we lose this case, I want to make sure that he has something to share with this world that I can carry on for the rest of my life with me. So in a video message, I told Mark through one of our friends who was going back and forth to the prison to talk to him and record his statements. And I told Mark that I'm doing my best, but in case, worst case scenario, if I fail, what is your message to me and to the rest of the world? And then he sent a message a week before he was executed.
So let's take a look. This was a week before Mark Stroman's execution.
Mr. Reyes, thank you for your inspiring act of compassion towards me. You have forgiven me. You have forgiven the unforgivable. And I have a lot of love and respect for you. For the Patels, the Hassans, thank y'all for what y'all have done. The question is, if I don't make it, what do I want you to carry on? Man, just what you're doing today is remarkable. To get out there and take center stage and try to get the world, put the world to rights. That's a remarkable thing you're doing, and just continue with the human rights movement, because you are touching so many people. I've been getting so many letters and messages from all over the world that you, Mr. Reyes, are inspiring them, and that right there strengthens me. So, dude, just rock on. Thank you for giving me. Okay.
Wow. It's hard to believe that that's the same man.
Yeah, absolutely. I was blown away. Beside this video, he also gave a lot of statements to the international press and talked about world peace, mercy, justice, and how wrong he was. And I wish the state of Texas allowed him to stay behind bar and contribute to build a better world.
The day of the execution, he was allowed to call people that he wanted to talk to before he was put to death, and he called you.
I was one of the person on the list to talk to him, and his execution was set at 6 p.m. on July 20th, 2011. And we were about to go to the court to give the last fight around 4:30 p.m. because we got a verdict from the federal court that this case has to go to state court. And last 3 days, we were going back and forth from state court to the federal court, and nobody wanted to give a verdict because they're saying it's a state case, go to the state, and state says it's a federal case, go to the federal. So we are just being bumped back and forth. And on the last day, once we got the final verdict, we were preparing to go to the court at around 4:30, and I was asked to call him at 4:15 p.m. I called. The prison system told me, you cannot talk to him. He's busy. And I thought, okay, I will call again. I called again. They said, he is busy. You cannot talk. I called again. I don't know how to give up. I called again. On the third time, they said, oh, you are Mr. Bhuiyan. You cannot talk to him. And I realized, because we filed a lawsuit against the prison system, and we are about to go to the court to give a last fight, so why they would allow me to talk to him? It's a revenge. So I called one of his friend who was managing all his phone calls, his everything. I said, why I cannot talk? What is happening? And he said, Rais, I'm talking to him right now. If you want, I can put you on a speaker and put both phones side by side because he was talking on a base phone. I said, let's go for it. So he put both phones face to face on a speaker. And I wanted to tell him what he had heard so far from media, from his lawyer, that I forgave him. And that was very important to me so that he hears from me. And he came on the phone, he said, Rais, thank you so much for what you've been doing and what you're trying to do. Thank you. And I said, Mark, you should know that I forgave you. I never hated you. And he said, I love you, bro. Thank you so much. Rais, they're asking me to go back. It was around 4:30. And anytime I talk about this phone conversation, I hear his voice. I mean, what can you expect from a man who is about to be executed within an hour and a half? What can you tell that person? What can you expect from that person? My eyes are full of tears that I'm about to go to the court to give a last fight, and he's about to go to the execution chamber where they will tie him up and put some cocktails in his body, and he'll be gone from this world, and this world will be a better place. I mean, I was crying after I hung up the phone, and my lawyer says, Rais, let's go to the court, last fight. We went to the court. He was sitting next to the execution chamber. We were able to get a temporary injunction that until this hearing is over, there'll be no execution. And we were very hopeful that finally we got something positive. And he was waiting. We were fighting in the court. The hearing started at 7 p.m., whereas the court closed at 5 p.m. And the hearing went ahead up to 8 p.m. And we were very hopeful. When I was testifying, I was crying like a baby. I couldn't hold my tears anymore because it was too much that in the free world, we're trying to save a human life. At the same time, another group of human beings tried to kill a human being at their best they could. And this gave me a perspective that why can't we come together and give him a chance to live behind bar and allow him to contribute to society in a positive way. I was crying and I was testifying that why it is so important to keep him alive, how he can contribute to the world and what we can benefit out of this. And I could tell there was a pin drop silence in the court. The clerk, the judge, everyone was quiet. And I looked at the judge's face and I saw tears in his eyes. And that gave me a positive feeling that, yes, we're hitting what we were expecting. But ultimately, within a few moments, the CCA, Court of Criminal Appeals Division, they called and told the judge, this court has no jurisdiction to proceed with this case. They have to stop it. And that was the end. The judge looked at me and he said, you had a very powerful case, but I'm sorry, I cannot proceed because I got this injunction from the higher court. Once the hearing was over, everyone left, me and my lawyer. I asked my lawyer, what is next? He said, there is nothing we can do. If we had time, we could have appealed again to the higher court in our side, but since there is no time and the execution has to take place today, I said, there has to be something, there has to be a workaround. He said, no. The judge came back. I was shocked. He tapped on my shoulder. He said, young man, keep doing what you're doing. The world needs this message. I'm sorry, I could not do what you expected, but your case was pretty strong. Go for it. And that gave me a huge accomplishment that, yes, I lost the case, but I won in a different way.
I want to open it up for questions in just a second. But Rais, what can we do to create a world without hate?
Well, that's a very good question. What we can do, we can teach our younger generations to treat everyone equally with respect and remind each of us every single day that no matter who is the victim, who is the victimizer, wrong is wrong, and we should do our best to uphold human rights and human dignity wherever we go, whatever we become, and whatever we do in our life, that we should always uphold the human rights and dignity, top of the list. And if we do that, we may not gain any material benefit, but I can promise you that the peace you will feel in your heart is heavenly, and you cannot buy that peace by any means. So So that's one thing we can do. The other thing we can do, raise awareness to the social issues that is plaguing our families, destroying our societies. Do not just think that it is not my problem, it is somebody else's problem. If there is a human suffering, please stand up. Support the organizations, they're fighting, they're going the extra mile to make this world a better place. Whatever ways you can, by your support, by financial support, by your moral support, by writing, by sharing their story, their cause to people you know who could be helpful. Please find ways to work together to make this world a better place.
Rais, thank you.
You're very welcome.
So we have some time for questions from you.
Over on the right.
Great. I'm curious to hear, in the scope of work that your organization is undertaking, any thoughts you have around criminal justice reform broadly, as well as the idea that the rehabilitative portion of what it means to be incarcerated, not just the punitive portion. I used to volunteer at the juvenile detention facility, and there were definitely people who thought that, oh, they need to be punished for decisions they made, when I felt that the much more positive and appropriate response is how to help rehabilitate the youth to be productive members of society. But I'm just curious to hear what efforts you're undertaking in that realm.
That's a very good question. 16 years back, when I went to see the White House first, I was standing outside as the first comer to the U.S. And I never imagined that day that the path of mercy and forgiveness will lead me inside eventually. Last year, I was invited to go to the White House several times. I was a part of the domestic policy committee, and I attended many of their meetings where people from grassroots level joined that meeting and sharing their experience, sharing their thoughts and ideas, how to overcome the social issues, the prison system, the LGBTQ community issues, how the White House can contribute to bring change in those areas. And it was fascinating to hear everyone's perspective and their ideas. So what I shared in those meetings, from my story, my ideas, and also what World Without Hate is doing right now, through our website, through programs, and my speaking engagement all over the world, we are educating people to learn more about 5 things. There's empathy, compassion, forgiveness, understanding, and acceptance. If we could master those 5 qualities, and if you could teach our younger generation these 5 qualities while focusing on the institutional education, I can guarantee you that our younger generation will be more peaceful, more loving, more caring, because they're learning these 5 qualities from their childhood, unlike Mark Stroman, who didn't have that access to learn those good qualities. So we have a program called Empathy Ambassador Leadership Program. You can find more about this program in our website, and our executive director, Jessica Kirst, is sitting there as well. I mean, if you're interested, she can share more with you about this program. But back to your question, that unfortunately, the prison system is a business in America. In a statistics, it was found 78% of the inmates return to the prison within 5 years, whereas in Norway, the return rate is only 18%. That shooter, Andreas Breivik, in 2012, who killed 79 teenagers in an island, he was given 18 years imprisonment. A few years back, he was complaining his Xbox was not fast enough. He wanted a different Xbox. So you can imagine how they treat their inmates and how we treat their inmates. And as a result of that, many inmates, they return to the prison within 5 years. So what can we do? There are some programs, the one I just mentioned, and also there is a huge need in the prison system for change. That punishment is needed, but there has to be an option to repair and rebuild and contribute to society in a positive way, so that others can learn from their mistakes. I mean, I truly believe that justice is only served when it is tempered with mercy. There has to be some mercy. Instead of giving harsh punishment, the perpetrator should know that he made a mistake. Now it's time to pay for it, and at the same time, he will be given a chance to rectify, improve, and come back to society to do his best. But that is not present in every case in our country. So I see there's a huge need for prison system change, and we need to bring these issues. We need to make more connections to the prison system, those who are running the prison, those who are policymakers, starting from the Congress to the local grassroots level. We need to raise this issue to every level, that how can we reduce the rate of the return, and how can we make prison as a place where they can rectify and can learn and come back as a better human being.
Rais, we have a question here from Jack.
Actually, Actually, it's not a question. 17 years ago, I was in South Africa with a project with this Rotary Club with the Mandela Foundation. And I sat in on one of the Truth and Reconciliation meetings. I'm not sure I can get through this. And I listened and watched a white guard tell a black family that he killed their father, and the family forgave him.
Okay, I think it's on. We live in a country where we've heard from the highest bully pulpit in our nation that Islam is a religion of hate, that Muslims hate us. You've obviously gone through an intense period of discernment, which is also oriented around your religion and during the Hajj experience. I would very much appreciate if you can share with this audience some of the discernment and the fundamentals from Islam that brought you into this forgiveness. Thank you.
Well, I grew up learning about stories, mercy and forgiveness. Like, for example, the story of Joseph, how he forgave his brother, even though they tried to kill him. So I learned that story when I was a little kid, like 5th or 6th grade. I learned about that. So that gave me perspective that, wow, he still can forgive his brother. So I remember that story through my entire life. As a young child, my mother taught me that when people hurt you, the first thing you do is put a zipper on your mouth. And since then, I've been carrying a virtual zipper in my pocket, because that will give you a chance to stop the violence, to de-escalate the situation, and it will give the other person a time to think about, I hurt him, but he didn't say anything bad to me, wow. So it stops the violence there, it gives a chance to the other person to come back to you tomorrow, and it helps, and you'll be able to respond better once you take time, and then forgive and move on. Do the next right thing, help others, that person will come back to you. So these are the teachings I grew up learning from my parents, and the story. There are a lot of stories in the Quran that talks about forgiveness, mercy. One I just mentioned about Prophet Joseph. So that helped me a lot. And also our prophet, who were brutally murdered in the city of Taif. And when Angel Gabriel came and asked him, what do you want? I can destroy this tribe. He said, if there is no people, then who will listen God's message? So he raised his hand, he forgave them, and he asked God that help them to understand. They may not get the message, but maybe the next generation will get the message. So that helped and shaped my life a lot.
Rais, thank you. Over the past year, since the shooting in Mukilteo, my friend Paul Kramer and I have had coffee a few times to encourage one another. One of those occasions, he shared a poem with me written by the great Maya Angelou. It's a poem that's very relevant to today's topic. It's called A Brave and Startling Truth. Paul read this to me as we walked a wooded trail behind a Starbucks, and the words really hit me. They are words that I think speak to the transformation that Rais sparked through love in the man who tried to kill him. So here's just a little bit of the poem. It's worth looking up. We, this people on this small and drifting planet, whose hands can strike with such abandon that in a twinkling life is sapped from the living, yet those same hands can touch with such healing irresistible tenderness, that the haughty neck is happy to bow, the proud back is glad to bend. Out of such chaos, such contradiction, we learn that we are neither devils nor divines. When we come to it, we must confess that we are the possible. We are the miraculous, the true wonder of this world. That is when, and only when, we come to it. We are adjourned.